Yo, welcome to another episode of Tuesdays with Jakey. I am your host, Jake Sufnerowski, and what a week, a monumental week in the history of my life. Multiple anniversaries this week. So I'm going to talk about two big stories that have, I guess, one that definitely shaped my life and another that reshaped my face. And that is my first ever trip to New York City, where I fell off a building. That happened 32 years ago today, August 17th, 1989. And then August 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, 2011 was my first ever trip to the Gathering of the Juggalos, where I chartered a bus, like a big Greyhound-style bus, and brought a bunch of literal maniacs to Cave In Rock, Illinois for the Gathering of the Juggalos, and ended up getting beaten almost to death by a bunch of bad actors at the festival. That's all I can call them. They weren't juggalos. Popular misconception about that story was that I got beat up by juggalos, and I'm pretty sure that wasn't the case. I think they were just meth-fueled psychopaths who were there looking for trouble, and since I'm a magnet for trouble, they found me and were attracted to me like flies on shit. That's not a good metaphor, because then it means I'm shit. Flies to the shit. Much better metaphor. So yeah, New York City. My first ever trip was in August of 1989, and I had wanted to go to New York City for as long as I can remember. My mother loves telling this story where I would say to her, would press my nose up against the glass of the window that looked out to the front of our house to the street, and I would tell her one day I would watch the garbage truck go up. Tuesdays was garbage day, and I would always watch for the garbage truck to come and get so excited, and the garbage truck would just take off somewhere else, and I never saw much outside of my house in my shitty little town, and I would always tell her, they're going somewhere. I'm going to go somewhere. Someday I'm going to get on the back of that garbage truck and ride it all the way to New York City. And that's a story she kept telling throughout my childhood and laughing as though I'd never make it to New York City. And no one in my family ever made it much of anywhere outside of our tiny little region. But I did. I would see it in the movies, and I would just be like, that's a special place. You know what I mean? Like, from a very young age, from literally as long as I can remember, I said I wanted to go there. And I would try to convince my dad to take me there, and he never would. And then in the sixth grade, I was in the sixth grade spelling bee, and my dad told me that if I won, he would take me to New York City to a wrestling match at Madison Square Garden. And I studied and crammed for that spelling bee. Not much you can do to study for a spelling bee because you don't know what the words will be. But I read a lot back then. Still do, I guess, mostly. I love to read. And I ended up finishing second. And I lost to Sven Skoog on the word ecstasy. I don't remember how I spelled it wrong. That's a funny little foreshadowing because, you know, in my 20s, I knew exactly how to spell ecstasy. It was with a $20 bill. But, yeah, I got that word wrong. He got it right. I came in second place, and I cried and cried. And then I went home that night, and I thought to myself, like, I bet my dad's going to take me to New York City anyways because that was such a good showing. Nope, didn't happen. And so then as I started getting older, I was like, how am I going to get to New York City? And in 10th grade, in my first time around 10th grade, I ended up dropping out of high school in December of 10th grade. I was just skipping school the entire time. I had skipped most of the days leading up to the Christmas break. And right before the Christmas break, the guidance counselor called me in and said, hey, you're not going to graduate, or you're not going to pass this year. You're going to have to go to summer school. No matter what you do, you won't pass because you've got all Fs for the first 2 semesters. And I was like, well, why are you telling me that? And he's like, you got to get your act together. And I'm like, but you just told me that if I didn't eat, no matter what I did, I wasn't going to pass the year. So I was like, I'm going to have to go to summer school anyway. Well, I'm just going to quit. And he's like, you can't quit. And I was like, okay, watch me. You can't keep me in school. And I was working at McDonald's at the time. And then I went and got a job at a gas station pumping gas, which, man, I fucking love that job. I pumped gas at an old Gulf station next to Settles Glass. which is a glass repair service. It fixed people's windshields. And I would go, I was already working at the gas station, actually. I was working the 3 to 11 shift. So then I started working 8 a.m. till 11 p.m. a few days a week there and a few days a week at McDonald's, and making minimum wage and scamming people out of money by selling them fake oil. That was my little hustle back then. Someone would come in and be like, I would keep an empty quart of oil on the rack. And so people would come in and be like, hey, will you check the oil? If they didn't have enough oil, I'd tell them they needed 2 quarts. And then I'd put in a fake one. I would unscrew the cap, make it look, it was under the hood. They couldn't see anything. Make it look like I was giving them 2 quarts, but I would only give them 1. If they didn't need any oil, I'd tell them they needed 1 quart. And then I'd just pour in the fake one. I get the funnel out, make a whole show of it, and I just send them on their way. And I'd pocket like whatever. I think it was $3 for a quart of oil back then. So it was like, you know, it was a nice little hustle. It was for my beer and weed money. And yeah, so that year I ended up going to summer school, and there were 2 sessions of summer school, and I took 2 classes in each session. And then I knew, like, all right, if I can pass these 4 classes, then I'll go back to do 10th grade again, and I only have to pass, like, I think it was 3 classes. You had to pass 7 classes at that point to get promoted to the next grade. So it was like, if I go do 10th grade again, and I can fuck off in a bunch of my classes. So I ended up having to go to summer school the following year, too, because I fucked off a little too much. Because by then I was, like, really got into selling drugs and be in trouble in my rap career, which is a whole nother story. I already had that rap career going a little bit at that point, which was also why I wanted to go to New York, because I wanted to buy records, because I had heard about all these record stores. And my friend that I went with, he had a cousin who lived on Long Island, and he would send him cassette recordings of the Mr. Magic radio show, and we would listen to all these recordings, and Mr. Magic would talk about different record stores in New York, like Rock and Soul was the main one, which right now I think might be in the same place. No, it was at 35th Street and 7th Avenue, and now it's at 40th Street and 5th Avenue. It moved like 5 or 6 years ago. We went to Rock and Soul, we went to Generation, we went to Second Coming, went to some other hip-hop centric stores, Vinyl Mania, and so on that, I did my summer school, and my sort of present to myself was to go to New York City. And I guess back then it was, I guess this was summer of 1989, and I guess parents weren't super concerned with just sending their kid on an Amtrak train in New York City. But I don't know how true that is. My parents weren't concerned. They were a little concerned, but they were like, by that point, they were well past the point of trying to tell me what to do and what not to do. Obviously, I dropped out of school. They weren't going to tell me I wasn't going to get on a train because I was going to go anyway. And so I went, and we went to New York, and we got off the train at Penn Station, and we somehow maneuvered our way to the Upper East Side to where we were staying, 322 East 94th Street, to my buddy Aunt Rosemary's house. I don't even say his name. He's such a bad dude in my life, so I don't know. What am I going to give him? I'm going to give him the name Hector. So we went to Hector's aunt's house, and we dropped our bags, and then we were like, let's go to Times Square. And we went down to Times Square, and we're just wandering around, and Times Square had not been Disney-fied. It was a dangerous place, but who knew how dangerous? Not me. I then, like now, lived my life by the motto of what's the worst that could happen, and I was just like, fuck it, we're going to go down there, and we did, and I don't remember what we were looking for. We're just trouble, really. We're just like in awe of the sights, and obviously we got pegged as being tourists immediately, and I think maybe we're trying to buy something, a fake ID, I don't know. I ended up in a conversation with this like total hustler, and I was trying to buy something, and I remember I like went to pull my money out, and he reached for my money, and then he grabbed me by the throat, and I put my money back in my pocket, and he grabbed me by the throat, and he slammed me against the wall, and he was like, give me all your fucking money. And I just started screaming, and that caused enough of a diversion for me to run into a bodega. And it was a bodega on a corner somewhere, because it had 2 entrances and exits. So I ran around the corner, went into the bodega, and then was just trying to buy like a bottle of water just to try to have a safe haven, hoping that he wouldn't follow me into the bodega. But of course he did, and he ripped a $5 bill out of my hand. And the bodega guy like screamed at me to get out, and I screamed like, this guy's, he's trying to rob me. So I ran out of there, and I ran into the lobby of a hotel with Hector close behind, and we got the doorman of the hotel to put us in a taxi cab, and that avoided getting robbed. And I remember I went into the hotel, and I for some reason I knew that the hotel would be more of a safe space than the bodega, because they weren't going to let these riffraff guys inside. Um, so the doorman ended up walking us out to a cab and basically saying, "What are you guys doing? Get the fuck out of here. Don't come back to this neighborhood. What are you thinking? Times Square is dangerous." And we were like, "Yeah, we know. Now we know." I was scared shitless. So we ended up we ended up taking a taxi cab all the way back up to Hector's Aunt Rosemary's house. And then we just spent the next few days wandering around the city, buying records. Spent all the money I managed to save, most of it on records, mostly hip-hop vinyl and double copies. So when I was DJing, I could scratch back and forth between two different copies. And it was just heaven. Like, where we were in Lowell, there was not a good record store. There was Garnick's, which is where it was a television repair and record store. They didn't have many hip-hop records. We'd have to go into Boston, but even Boston didn't have the best hip-hop records shops. But in New York, you could find anything, as many copies as you wanted. And was buying back then, it would have been lots of Eric B. and Rakim, Public Enemy records, Big Daddy Kane. I was buying a lot of older stuff, UTFO, Run DMC records, like all the 12 inches I could get, because the 12 inches also they would have instrumental versions of the tracks, and then a lot of them would have a cappella versions of the tracks. So you could scratch just the guy's vocals and drop it onto the instrumental version and kind of create your own remixes on the fly with two turntables. And I was buying a lot of breakbeat records too, which were just like, they would isolate the breakbeat from a famous funk song and loop it over and over, so you just have that record to mix in with other records. And I was doing a lot of DJing at that time, both as a business, or I had my little commercial DJ business for dances and weddings and birthday parties, and Jack and Jill's, which I think I've mentioned on here before. But a Jack and Jill is a very New England thing, and maybe a very like Boston Lowell thing, but it was for white trash people to come up with the money to have a wedding. So you would have a Jack and Jill at like the VFW hall or the back room of a bar, and you would charge people admittance like $10 to get in, and there would be a DJ, and I DJ'd a lot of those. Even at like 14 and 15, I was getting these gigs, and always ended with fights and the police coming. And I learned after a couple of gigs to get paid in advance, because when the police come and everybody scatters, it's hard to track down your money afterwards. And then they don't want to pay you because they said they had to pay extra money to the venue. And so I learned to get my money in advance. But yeah, all these breakbeat records were fucking great, because then you could rap over them, and then you could sample the beats and get all these breaks, and you didn't have to search for all these funk records. And then a lot of them also had, at the end, it'd be one track that just had a bunch of different sounds, like yo, and like different, like just different sounds you could scratch on, like a horn blast or something like that. So you'd be that kind of shit. And so I was in heaven. Eventually I came back with records, but I would come back to Aunt Rosemary's house every day with just a huge stack of records. I bought some G.G. Allin records, which we'll factor into that story later. And I bought some bootlegs, some like old Led Zeppelin and Rolling Stones bootlegs that, like, back then, before tape trading, it was really hard to find live shows. And I used to collect a lot of live shows from my strung-out sister's junkie boyfriend. Used to sell cassette tapes of live shows on the sidewalk outside of Tower Records in Boston. So I used to buy a lot of those from him. He had these cool hand-drawn covers, but I wanted, like, vinyl records of classic old Stones and Zeppelin, and the Who shows that I had read about by reading all these biographies. It was like, I can get Zeppelin at Nebworth. Oh, my God, this is great. And so I was just buying records all day, and then at night we would just wander around, and we didn't know where to go. We didn't know anything about the city. And I remember walking down Broadway one night. We were just like, we're on Broadway. We're on like 4th and Broadway, which is where Tower Records was, which is where Eric B. and Rakim talked about at the end of Paid in Full. And we're like, where is everybody? This is the city that never sleeps. But like, we didn't know at that point that you would probably have to go over to the East Village or over to Bleecker Street. We just didn't understand. So we did a lot of wandering around, just like lost. We didn't have a travel guide or anything like that. All we knew was how to find the record stores. And that was more than enough. And then on the last day of our trip, the last day was August 17th. And we had been tasked that day with taking Hector's nephew around. His name was Evan, I believe. And the kid was so fucking annoying. So by the end of the day, we were like, or by midday, we were like, dude, if you just fucking behave and stop being an annoying 10-year-old or whatever he was. Wasn't even that much younger than us. But we're like, if you just behave, we'll do whatever you want tonight. And he was like, okay. So at a certain point, we went up to the roof of the apartment building on 94th Street. And we just started fucking around, looking around. And if you know those tenement buildings in New York, there's a ton of buildings on a block connected by one roof. And between each of those buildings is a firewall, which is like a 2 foot, maybe 1 foot thick brick wall, 18-inch or something, brick wall that would go down between the buildings so that if a fire broke out on one building, it wouldn't be able to spread to the next. They weren't built out of wood. There was wood in the actual buildings, but the firewall would protect the fires from spreading from one building to the next, or that was the idea. So the firewalls would go up probably about 2 feet above the roof of the building, and that's how you knew when one building started, when one ended, the next started. And we were walking along the roof and looking around, and way down at the end, probably like 10 buildings down, there was another building that was probably 20 stories tall. The ones we were on were 5 stories tall, and we're like, oh wow, this roof goes on forever, And we ended up going back downstairs after playing up there for a while. The sun had set, and it was the 20th anniversary of Woodstock at that point. So Woodstock had happened August 17th, 1969. This was 89. And the Woodstock movie was on. So we were watching that for a while, and the last song we saw was Country Joe and the Fish, when he was doing a song, Feel Like I'm Fixing a Die Rag, where the chorus was, and it's 1, 2, 3, what are we fighting for? Don't ask me, I don't give a damn. Next stop is Vietnam, and it's 5, 6, 7. Open up those pearly gates. Ain't no time to wonder why. Whoopee, we're all gonna die. And we watched that, and then Evan was like, you told me we could do whatever we wanted tonight if I behaved, and I behaved. So we're like, okay, you did. What do you want to do? And he was like, let's go up on the roof and play hide and seek. And we're like, okay, word. So we're like, you wait here, count to 100. We'll go up on the roof and hide. And he was like, all right. So Hector and I went up to the roof and just fucking around for a little bit, just talking, looking around at the sights. And Evan said, we heard him from downstairs scream like, ready or not, here I come. And Hector was like, fuck, let's hide. So Hector went one way and I went the other way, and I started running along the rooftop. And every time I came to one of these firewalls, I would put my hands on it and like vault over it, like leap over it. I put my hands down and throw my legs out to the side and hop over. And I hopped over 5 or 6 of those things, and it was pretty dark out. And I just assumed from being up there earlier that the roof went on forever until it ran into that 20-story building. And at a certain point, I ran out of roof, and I had already put my hands down on the firewall, and I had leapt over it. And as soon as my body had cleared the firewall, I could see down, and I could see that I was going to fall all the way to the ground. And I just remember, plain as day, I remember just thinking the words in my head, this is it. I didn't really freak out. I didn't panic, really. I just thought, this is it. Okay, that's it. You're dead, I didn't think you're dead. I just thought, this is it. I can still remember that right now, going through my head. And then I passed out, or at least that's where I lost my memory. And I fell down along the side of the building and landed in an alley. And I landed in a pile of like junk, really, just trash, bricks and pieces of wood and various discarded objects. And I woke up down there, and I woke up to the sound of a gun cocking in my face, and then a flashlight or a lighter or something shined in my eyes. And I was laying there, and then I heard the gun cock, and then I heard someone say, what the fuck are you doing? And I remember saying to the guy, I just fell off the roof up there, but don't worry about it. I'm fine. This couldn't be happening to me. This is only a dream. And that's when the light came on. And I guess he shined this light into my face and saw all the blood on my face and freaked out. And he was like, holy shit. He was like, stay right there. I'm going to go call an ambulance. And I was like, okay. But I kept saying, like, you don't need to call an ambulance. I'm going to be fine. This can't really be happening to me. That's all I was thinking, was that, like, I couldn't really be fucking lying here on the ground. And the dude took off. And a very vague memory of getting up and wandering over to a stairway and then sitting down on the stairway and just thinking to myself, like on the top stair, and thinking to myself, like, my parents are going to fucking kill me. My parents are going to fucking kill me. And I put my head down in my hands like this. And then must have been light coming from somewhere in that alley. And I lifted my head up and saw all the blood on my hands and arms. And right around that time, the paramedics came around the corner and came up the stairway. And they like laid me back down pretty gently on my back, and they were like, don't worry, you're going to be okay. We're here. And they kept asking me what happened, and I just kept saying, I fell off the roof. I fell off the roof. And then I'd gone to see The Who that summer doing their 20th anniversary of the Tommy album. And I had been wearing the bootleg T-shirt that I bought in the parking lot for that show, and the paramedics cut it off of me. And I remember freaking out and telling them, "Don't cut my shirt. This is my T-shirt from the Who concert." And they're like, "Your shirt doesn't fucking matter, bro." They laid me down on my back, and they ended up getting some sort of stretcher out and a neck brace, and they asked me how I got to where I was, and I told them I had walked, and they were like, "How the fuck did you walk?" You know, and I was like, "I just walked. I got up and walked." And they ended up, I remember them hauling me through the alley and into the back of an ambulance, and then they just kept asking me, like, you know, who do we call? Who do we contact? Where are your parents? And I just kept saying, I'm staying with Rosemary O'Connell, 322 East 94th Street. Staying with Rosemary O'Connell, 322 East 94th Street. And they kept asking, are you on drugs? Have you been taking anything? Are you trying to kill yourself? And they just kept asking these questions over and over, and I just kept saying, no. And then finally, last thing I remember from that evening was singing the Country Joe and the Fish chorus over and over, which is, you know, and it's 1, 2, 3, what are we fighting for? Don't ask me, I don't give a damn. Next stop is Vietnam. And it's 5, 6, 7, open up those pearly gates. Whoopee, we're all going to die. So I guess I can see why they thought I was on drugs. It would make perfect sense. Yeah, I guess the next thing I remember was at some point waking up in the emergency room and laying on a table and talking to some doctors, and them telling me that I was going to be okay. And I don't, my memory of all this after this is kind of fuzzy. I ended up in the hospital for 10 days in New York at the Cornell Medical Center, 70th Street and York Avenue. And remember, I was on the 6th floor, which is funny because I fell 6 floors. So it was a 5-story building, but I fell into the basement level because there had been a building there before that had been demolished. And that's what a bunch of the debris was the demolition debris from that building. So I'd fallen 6 stories, and I remember the irony of being on the 6th floor in that hospital. And remember the next day, I ended up, like, I remember really talking to the doctors, and they couldn't believe the shape I was in, the good shape I was in after a fall like that. And I had broken my 3rd and 4th lumbar vertebrae. They were compression fractures. So from that, they showed me the x-rays, and like my vertebrae were kind of squished. Your regular vertebrae on the x-ray looked to be about 1 inch, and these looked to be about a 1/2 inch, and you could see cracks in them. And I'd broken every rib on my left side. I had broken my periorbital fracture, they call it. It's the bone under your eyebrow. And the best that doctors could ascertain based on where the landlord said he found me was that, or the super, where that's who someone had called the super and said that they heard someone hit the ground, something in the alley, and they assumed that I had jumped over the fence and was trying to break into the building. So they called the super, and that's why he came out and found me with his gun. And I guess he had told the paramedics and the doctors where I had fallen, and I had fallen on a window line, and based on the cut in my head or whatever, they told me that they think I hit my head on an air conditioner on the way down, and that's what knocked me out, and also it slowed my body down and made me completely limp when I hit the ground. So that's why I didn't break more. And they said if I had stayed awake and like tensed up, then I would have my whole body would have basically shattered, and I would have been dead. And so it was a lot of luck. And Hector and his cousin, they didn't know that I had fallen, so they were just like hanging out on the roof looking for me. And eventually someone came up to the roof, and I must have cut someone's cable line somehow or pulled it out with my foot when I was jumping over one of those firewalls, because someone came upstairs complaining their cable was out and yelling at them for being on the roof. So they assumed I found another way down onto the street. So they spent a while, they said, walking along the street just looking for me, because they didn't want to go back to Aunt Rosemary's house and explain that they had lost their friend and they didn't know where I was. And they told me the next day when they were finally able to come see me at the hospital that they had seen an ambulance trying to fight its way through traffic on First Avenue, and they were like, whoever that ambulance is for is going to die. And I don't know how true this is, but people told me afterwards that they're like, you know, you were on 94th Street. There's a hospital up there in Harlem at like 116th Street. It would have been easier for them to take you there, but they took you to Cornell Medical Center, so you probably got better treatment and blah, blah, blah. And like, I'm like, that's great, I guess. But I didn't really get any treatment. Nothing ever happened. I wore a back brace for a bunch of weeks after that. I just laid in bed for 3 or 4 days, and then finally I was able to get up and walk with a walker. And my mother ended up coming down from New York to see me after a few days, and would come visit me in the hospital. And that was, to be honest, that sucked. I just wanted to like lay there, and like Hector brought me a Walkman and some tapes, and I was just like listening to tunes, and I had cable, and I was eating, and like I was in a lot of pain, but I was also on pain meds. My eyebrow bone had swollen out, and I couldn't move without considerable discomfort. Couldn't even like roll over on my side. I was peeing I actually had a catheter for a while. I remember in the ER them giving me the catheter. Oh, that was like, they were like, this is going to be uncomfortable. And I was like, what? And I felt someone touching my junk. And I was like, whoa, okay. That catheter, if you don't know, it's when they stick a little tube down your dick, down your urethra, and it just sucks the pee-pee out of your kidneys or whatever. I don't know how far they jam it, but it's for people who can't move, so you're not pissing your pants. Then after a few days, they pulled it out. I remember the sensation of getting it pulled out was like not pain. It was interesting. It wasn't good, not by a long shot, even though it was a good-looking nurse who pulled it out. But it was weird. It was something I don't want to feel again. I did feel again, but I don't want to feel a third time. And and then after a while, I would have to like lay over on my side and pee into a little bedpan, and I don't even remember how I was shitting. I do remember at some point being able to like get up with a walker and taking a shit, and like just very tenderly walking everywhere. And there's this one nurse who was pretty rad, and that summer was the summer Tom Petty's Full Moon Fever album came out with the hit single Free Fallin', and she bought that for me. She said she had heard it on the radio and thought that it was a song that I just needed to have, so she brought me the cassette. I listened to that a bunch, and obviously now to this day I can't listen to that song without thinking of that song. Listen to that song without thinking of that incident. And eventually made my way back home. I flew home. There was a lot of debate, I remember, with my mother and the doctor about whether I should drive home or fly home. And they're like, an ambulance ride's going to cost this much, and he'll be able to lay flat, and he should be laying flat as much as possible. But like, get on the plane, hope there's not much turbulence. If there is, it's going to be really painful, but it probably shouldn't cause him any permanent damage. And I flew home. That was only my second time ever on an airplane. My first, I guess third. My first was to Florida when I was 5 years old. Went to Florida and back, and hadn't been on a plane since. And wow, shit, we flew Trump Air. I had never even made that connection. Odd to say, it was a perfectly pleasant flight. That was when Trump was running an airline service between New York and Boston. And it was a pleasant enough flight. And I got home, and I don't remember. Somebody must have picked me up at the airport, me and my mother in Boston, and driven us back. And I remember like my grandparents came to see me, and some cousins and aunts and uncles, and everyone wanted to yell at me, tell me how stupid I was, and then tell me how this meant that I was destined for great things in life, and that God was looking out for me. And I never fell for any of that. Took a long time to even really have a feeling that like maybe there was an angel of some sort, and that maybe I was destined for something better. But actually, it made me more nihilistic in a lot of ways. More like, I should be dead now, so who cares what I do? That lasted for a little while. Not a whole long time. But that led to my first tattoo, which I got not long after I got home. Ended up driving up to New Hampshire with Hector. He drove me up, and we got turned away from a tattoo shop in Seabrook, New Hampshire. Tattooing was illegal in Massachusetts at that point, so we got turned away from a tattoo shop in Seabrook, and because I had a fake ID, but it was a terrible one, and the guy was like, "Get the fuck out of here! Come back when you're 18." And then on the drive back, we noticed this like piece of plywood leaning against a tree in kind of a remote area, and I said tattoos with an arrow, so I was like, "Hector, pull in there," and I ended up getting tattooed by this drunk guy. in literally a shack. And he tattooed an Ankh, which is an Egyptian symbol of eternal life. I thought that was cool at that point because my friend Donnie Maker, who was the lead rapper for the group the EMCs, after I got back, when he came to see me when I was at my house, he gave me an Ankh necklace and told me it was the Egyptian symbol of eternal life, and I thought that was cool, so I wore that for a while, and then I got that tattooed on my leg, and dude, when it was done, it was terrible. I ended up having to get it covered up in black to even make it symmetrical, and yeah, that summer, it was the same summer that NWA's Straight Outta Compton had come out. I remember listening to that a lot in my basement while I was doing my recovery, and I ended up going back to school, I don't know, a few weeks after school started. I was getting my homework sent home at first because I wasn't like still fully able to walk. But then when I was finally able to walk, I ended up going back to school. And I remember not long after that, I was supposed to have a fight with a kid named Brian Miller. This was like one of those organized after-school fist fights, which I saw plenty of. Which now they don't make a lot of sense. And like you would be like, all right, after school we're going to meet at this place, and we decided we were going to meet somewhere, and then I went there, and then somehow word got to it that Brian had changed the location of our fight, and we were supposed to meet at the Marshall's parking lot. And I remember going to the parking lot, and like he had wanted to fight me right when I got back to school, but we like pushed the fight date back a few weeks. And when we finally were going to have the fight, I was at the Marshall's parking lot, and like this, it was a Goodwin, what was his name? Chuck Goodwin showed up in his pickup truck, and with Brian Miller in the back, and like his friends had to force him to get out of the pickup truck. And then I just kept chasing him around in these parked cars, and he was like running from me, and I'm like, bro, are we going to fight or not? Like, let's get it on. Let's get ready to rumble. And at some point, he just like admitted that he didn't want to fight me, and I won by default without a single punch being thrown. And I think that was my last organized fist fight, which is cool. Those are stupid. I wouldn't recommend anybody do those. Do those still happen nowadays? Do kids do that? I assume so. I see all these fights on YouTube and stuff. But now they're probably like, I don't even mean like, you see those fights on YouTube, they're like backyard fighting. But I mean like, are there fights that are like you diss someone in school and then it's like, all right, me and you, 3 o'clock outside. And like right outside the school, none of us would do that because we knew if we fought on school grounds, we'd get in trouble. But I don't even understand the point of that. Like, I got suspended a bunch of times in school, and I always remember being like, a few times I got in-school suspension. Like, if you did something that wasn't super bad, you would get in-school suspension. But if you did something really bad, you'd get out of school. So there were a couple of times where I got in trouble for doing whatever the fuck it was. Stealing an extra lunch. I got caught for smoking without a smoking pass. Fighting, roughhousing, and a few times I remember like my penalty was in-school suspension, and that meant like if you got in one sort of trouble, you would have free periods in school at that time, and if you got in trouble, you'd have to spend your free period in like the detention lounge, like the in-school. It was also called the in-school suspension room. So if you got an in-school suspension though, you'd have to spend the entire day in there, and your homework would get delivered to you. So I learned kind of quickly that like telling the principal to go fuck himself, or it was Angie Toronto and Bob Bennett. And if you told them to go fuck themselves, told them they were fat, told them their wife was cheating on them, like you would get, immediately it'd be out of school suspension. And I was like, well, out of school is way better. So I said all those things to my principals, and just to get out of school suspension. Cause I was like, I don't want to fucking sit in a room for 3 days. Give me a 3-day out of school, 3-day and 5-day out of schools is what I got a few of. Which was cool. And yeah, so my back, for a long time, probably like 3 or 4 years, my back hurt every day, and it's all I could think about. And I was very adverse to getting into dangerous situations. I tried not to get in fights for a while. Didn't completely work. Then I ended up, with a whole nother story, but I ended up, after my second time around in 10th grade, 11th grade started, and I was really fucking off, and I was selling a lot of drugs at that point, weed and mostly acid. And I ended up getting called into the principal's office with my parents, and the police were there, and they basically told my parents, like, your son is a drug dealer. And I was like, no, I'm not. You can't prove shit. You never seen me. And I had already been taken to the local jail for a scared straight program, and none of that worked. Caught stealing a car. the police basically told my parents, like, if you don't get him out of this town, we don't care what the fuck you have to do. You want to move, whatever. We're going to put him in jail. We're going to catch him. And then I never admitted to my parents that I was selling drugs. Of course, I just lied, just to keep their hearts from breaking. But they knew I was up to all sorts of no good. So that's when they ended up sending me away to boarding school in Wolfboro, New Hampshire, to Brewster Academy. And my dad worked for the federal government, never had that much money, but all he cared about with his money. We didn't have nice cars ever. We never had a brand new car in my whole life. And I never had a bicycle, but we weren't poor. But my dad just saved his money and invested or whatever he did in stock market. And his whole goal was to pay for his kid's education. So both of my sisters one went to Holy Cross, one went to Boston College, and my dad paid everything for them while they were there, except spending money. Paid for books, tuition, housing. And so he was like, we're going to send you away to a boarding school, and it's going to be expensive, but it's either that or you're going to go to jail, and you're going to be forced to not fuck around. And there were some really exclusive boarding schools. There was Phillips Exeter, Phillips Andover. Brewster was it was fine. I mean, it was a really nice school, great location on Lake Winnipesaukee in Wolfboro, New Hampshire. It was gorgeous. It looked really cool. We went to a couple other. We went to Cushing, Wakefield, another in Massachusetts to look at, and those were I don't know that they were reform schools, but they felt like reform schools, whereas Brewster was like a boarding school for mostly rich kids, and my dad somehow paid for it. They didn't usually take people mid-semester or mid-year, so I did my second half of 11th grade there and my full 12th grade, and somehow something had happened. A kid had gotten kicked out, and then there was also some scholarship money that I somehow got because they wanted to fill the slot, and my dad had some money, so we ended up getting a deal of some sort, I remember. And then the deal was I was going to have to pay it back or pay for a couple of years at college, which didn't end up happening. But when I got there, I just I fucking totally turned my life around for the best. And I just when I got there, I was just a fucking hoodlum. All I cared about was being a hoodlum, drinking, taking drugs. And when I got there, kids were trying to sneak drinks on the weekend and smoke cigarettes. And I was like, I don't have anything to do with any of this. Now that I think of it, it kind of reminds me of when I ended up getting, I had the good fortune to be able to sort of reinvent myself up there. Nobody knew anything about me. I showed up there. I didn't tell anybody that I had a rap career. There's a lot of parallels in my life. I went there and I got the chance to reinvent myself. Just like when I went to the treatment center in Ocala, Florida, when I tried to kill myself. I ended up 2 years ago, in case you missed out on some of this podcast. That's, I'm not going to get into that. But when I went there, I worked my ass off and said, I have this opportunity. I'm going to make the most of it. It's much like up in Yellow Pine now, where I'm living, working. I ended up in this fucking really tiny town in Idaho, population 23, middle of fucking nowhere, Yellow Pine, where I'm the bartender now. Nobody knows anything about my past up there, and I did that on purpose. Nobody knows that I was a concert promoter. I just very vaguely said that I worked in the concert business in New York, but I guess that's a theme for my life, which I'm just kind of connecting now. But when I got to that boarding school, I was just like, I'm going to fucking just pour myself into academics and sports. I played golf, baseball, and basketball. I ended up being the captain of the JV baseball team, the captain of the JV basketball team. Ended up the editor of the school newspaper. I was taking AP calculus. I was on the debate team. I was captain of the math team. We had a traveling math team where we go to math meets. And I ended up graduating fourth in my class. And I applied to 14 colleges and got into 12 of them. The two I didn't get into were Colby College in Maine. And I only applied to that because my history teacher, Mr. Palmer, who taught my favorite class, America since 1945. It was America since 39, but it was really about our involvement in World War II and then through Korea and Vietnam, and got a little bit into the Gulf War. And then, but Mr. Palmer had gone to Colby, so I thought that would be a cool place to go because he was cool. And then I applied to Williams College, which is where my dad went, and got waitlisted. I think they only waitlisted us because I was the son of an alumni. I shouldn't have gotten in. But I think the idea that I had such great grades, I think, everyone would tell you different stories back then about what college acceptance admission deans were looking for. And I think it was a thing that, like, even though I had fucked around so much, that I showed so much promise by going to this boarding school and blah, blah, blah. And then I ended up going to Babson College in Massachusetts. Sometimes I think that was the worst decision of my life, because I went to a business college and to study entrepreneurial studies. Sometimes I think that was the worst decision of my life, and I wish I had gone to USC, which is where I really wanted to go, University of Southern California, but my parents wouldn't let me go there. They said it was too far from home, and I probably would have gotten into a lot of trouble in LA at that time. But I ended up going to Babson for 1 year, and it was terrible, but it was also the best decision of my life, because it was there that I met Scott Pollock, who I started Witch Records with, and after 1 year there, I went down to LA. Then I lived on a friend's couch who I had met at Brewster, Andrew Klein, and then me and Scott Pollock stayed in touch, and he dropped out of college. I dropped out of college. I had done so well in my 1 year at Babson, too, that I was brought back. I was going to be an RA in a dorm to get free housing. That was going to, make up for some of the money that my dad had to spend to send me to boarding school, so I wouldn't have to end up paying for college. But then I ended up I became the ghostwriter for the entire English as a second language congregation they had there, because my roommate was from the Dominican Republic with a rich father, and I wrote one of his papers for him and charged him $20 a page, and then I was writing papers the whole time. That was my hustle in college. But about my back, so even into my year of college, my back was hurting all the time. My back would always hurt after baseball games and playing golf and playing basketball at Brewster. I remember Rex Snyder, the physics teacher there, was really trying to get me to join the wrestling team, because he needed a heavyweight. He didn't have a heavyweight on the team. And I was like, I'm not joining a fucking wrestling team. First of all, you don't have ropes. I can't blade someone. You don't do steel cage matches. So I wasn't too interested, but I was like, not with all this back pain. So I went to Babson, and I had an insane amount of back pain. The summer between Brewster and Babson, I ended up working at UPS for the summer, and that was probably no good for my back, lifting a lot of heavy packages. But I just would have this awful back pain, and I remember every morning I would wake up and I would take a deep inhale, and it would feel like that my entire rib cage all the way around and my spine were made out of glass, and it would feel like the glass was shattering. Every time I would take a deep breath. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to have to live with this back pain for the rest of my life. You read about people who have a bad back. Everyone with back pain always feels sorry for themselves. And I was just like, I'm going to have to feel sorry for myself. There's nothing I could do. And I would read different things, and people would tell me, oh, you got to strengthen your core. So I would do tons of sit-ups and exercises and try to figure out how to strengthen my core, because the back muscles will stabilize your spine was the idea. And nothing I did would help. And I also remember anytime I would bend over to wash my face over a sink, you just bend a little bit at the waist in your lower back and splash water on my face, or to rinse my mouth out after I was done brushing my teeth. And then I would go to stand up straight again, and it would just be excruciating pain. And I was just resigned to having to feel that for the rest of my life. And by that point, I'd started listening to a lot of Howard Stern when he was still on terrestrial radio. And it was easy to listen to him in Boston, because Boston's number one radio DJ was Charles Laquadera, the father of morning radio, they used to call him. I don't know how true that is. I did get to interview him for the Babson newspaper, and I spent a day on the air with him in the studio. And I was doing these impressions of an Indian guy at a Indian grocer on the show, and then they invited me after that. We traded numbers after my day there interviewing him and everything, and I would call in every now and then and be that character. So I just call the producer on random mornings and be like, hey, I heard you guys talking about whatever, I'll do my character. And they were like, okay. But I would listen to Howard Stern. He was playing in evenings at that time, so he was on 7 to 11 p.m. Everywhere else around the country was broadcast in the morning, but they would delay it. So 7 to 11 p.m. was perfect for me, because I would listen to Howard Stern while I was doing my homework or writing the papers for all the kids from Central and South America with the rich parents. And so I read the book Private Parts when that came out, which was his autobiography. And in his autobiography, he had a whole chapter about his back pain. And then he talked about a book by a Dr. Sarno, who I never went on to read that book, But Howard Stern went into such great detail about, in that one chapter of his book, that he was talking about Dr. Sarno and how Dr. Sarno's whole philosophy was that most pain, especially back pain, is psychosomatic, and people have an injury and then they just let that overtake them, or they pull their back, and you just invent that pain. And dude, I read that chapter, and I swear to God, I went to bed that night and it made so much sense to me. It was like my brain had been struck by lightning reading that. And I started thinking about the people in my family who had back pain, and they were all the most bullshittiest people in my family, like the aunts and uncles and cousins who were the biggest jerk offs, and some other people in my life who I knew was like, oh, I'm always in pain, I can't work, and oh, I'm getting disability because of my back pain. And it all made so much sense to me, because I was like, you guys create this pain because you need something to complain about. And I'm sure, to this day, I know a lot of people like that, and I'm sure people listening do, whether it's back pain, whether it's anxiety. So much of that is self-caused. Mental stuff, obviously. But physical pain, I think so much of that is psychosomatic. I woke up the next day with no back pain, and I've had almost no back pain for the rest of my life. I remember pulling my back once really badly when I picked a kid up at an orphanage in Africa. I just picked him up the wrong way, and my back was super sore, and I had to drive from the village of Sese, where I was staying, to Gaborone the next day, and it was excruciating, because I had actually pulled a serious muscle. But other than that, I've had almost no back pain. I guess some crazy mosh pit accidents, but that said, the back pain I have experienced for the rest of my life has all been inflicted, mostly self-inflicted, from something I've done and struggled with for a few days or a week or whatever, and then finally went away. But like, any pain associated with the exact spot where I hurt myself and I used to have that pain has gone completely away, and I've never had to deal with that since, which is, fucking phenomenal. And yeah, I had a couple other instances, like, I don't know, probably could count it on two hands. Could totally count it on two hands, maybe even on one, of how many times I've had a pain in my back that came out of nowhere that I thought, like, oh, I remember that pain. That's the same pain I had after I broke my back. And yeah, and maybe that was psychosomatic shit that I was bringing back up, or maybe it was the real shit. Maybe it was the real shit from from, it's just leftover pain from these vertebrae. I don't know. I've always been super fearful of chiropractors since then, because the doctors, I went for some follow-up visits because I was still on my parents' medical insurance back then, and I went to some at the Leahy Clinic in Burlington, Massachusetts. That was the hospital they took me to for whatever reason. Apparently that was like a big deal, and I remember having to pass Raytheon to get there, and I remember how Raytheon was a big deal job for people where I grew up to have. And that was back when defense contracting was looked at as like a noble pursuit, which obviously this week everything in the news is about the war in Afghanistan, the 20-year war in Afghanistan, and everything bad that's happening over there. And it's a hell of a tangent to get on, but like, the whole idea that like everyone's talking about how bad the situation is in Afghanistan, like right now, right? That the government just fucking stranded everybody, and especially all the people in Afghanistan who had helped us out. And then, of course, all the human rights AIDS workers, the people who were there helping women, all these NGO people, all these fucking translators and interpreters, they were all just going to be left to be murdered, I guess, murdered by the Taliban. These people are like trying to hang on to fucking planes they're leaving. And it's like, how did you not get these people out beforehand? Like, what? And like, yeah, the idea of Raytheon, that like working for a defense contractor was a noble thing. It was like, I kind of understood back then that it wasn't noble. Maybe not in 89, because in 88, 89, right? That's when we did the first Operation Desert Storm, and we had the Scud missiles that could shoot down their missiles, or maybe theirs were the Scuds, whatever. We had these missiles that could shoot other missiles out of the sky, and I wasn't too worldly then, so I kind of believed that rah-rah patriotism. But even then, I knew to a point. I was like, man, don't they have oil over there? But like, just the idea now that like, to think that Afghanistan war was anything but to pump trillions of dollars into the pockets of defense contractors, and to think like, like to be like, oh, I feel bad for those Afghanistan people. You fuck yeah, you should feel bad for them. But like, if that's not enough to make you understand that the U.S. government is just a sickening thug terrorist organization in its own right. You know, like, man, like, reminds me of that thing Louis C.K. said, where, like, yeah, like, sure, it's terrible that soldiers go over to Afghanistan and the Middle East and get killed, but if you show up in Afghanistan with a machine gun trying to kill people and you get blown up, kind of your fucking fault, you know? I don't need to go into too much more of that, but yeah, I would go to Leahy Clinic and get some follow-ups, and the main thing I remember was the doctors telling me somehow about the way that my spine compressed and the vertebrae compressed, that it reversed a slight curvature in that part of my spine, and they showed me on the x-rays, and it all made sense to me. And ever since then, whenever I've gone to get a massage, I tell the massage therapist, do not touch that part of my back. Because for whatever reason in my head, it's still like it's curved in the opposite way that it's supposed to be, even if it's slight, and that like something that someone might do to my lower back, thinking they're doing the right thing to someone whose lower back is normally shaped. Like, unless you're looking at x-rays and you're some sort of osteopath, like, I don't want you touching my lower back. I certainly would never go to a chiropractor. There's a fucking million reasons why I wouldn't go to a chiropractor, unless I'd have to get a super duper fucking great recommendation. But like, all the chiropractors I know, I've said this before, I know on this podcast, but all the chiropractors I know are batshit fucking crazy, and I would never take any sort of medical advice or physical adjustments from them. Some of them I love to death, but they're batshit fucking crazy, and I wouldn't let them put their hands on me in any sort of medical way. And masseuses too. Most masseuses I know are batshit crazy. There's just a few, and I bet most acupuncturists are batshit crazy. Pretty much anybody who has a job in the medical field without having some sort of medical degree, you know, like, give me nurses, physician's assistants, doctors, trust every one of them, or at least trust them enough until I start talking to them. Then I might not trust them. But like, if you have a certificate from somewhere and you're gonna try to do things to me that can involve, like, change the way my body works, like, I'm not fucking interested. Especially not if I know you were at Fish last weekend taking that $20 word ecstasy, that's most of the complete whack job ones I know are Fish fans. Then again, pretty much every Fish fan I know is a fucking whack job too. I mean, if you ever listen to that music, it's really weird. I have a hard time. I did go to a Fish show on Halloween a few years back, and I had a really good time for the first two sets. And then someone was like, I was like, why isn't everyone leaving? And they're like, because the third set's coming up. And I was like, oh no, it's not for me. Holy Christ, two is enough. I was supposed to get into this Juggalo thing, and I don't think I'm going to get there. Maybe I should. I don't know. I feel like I put myself into a bit of somber mood with that, with the backstory, with the falling off the building. Maybe I'll save the Juggalo one for next week. I thought it would be great to do because of how this whole anniversary's worked. But yeah, maybe I'll do that for next week. But a little more about that, the falling off the building incident. Yeah, for a long time, you know, I would get told like that this is like a message from God. You know, you're put on this earth to do something special. And I don't know that I believe in that at all. But also, like, I seem to have a fucking pretty Olympic caliber team of guardian angels that have been looking out for me throughout my life. So, but does that mean I'm supposed to do something special? I don't know. Do I just have better luck because I create good karma? I like to think that's a good part of it. I like to think that all the generosity that I've exhibited to all my friends throughout my life, and that's as far back as I can remember. You know, I think spiritual generosity, emotional generosity, but financial generosity, like, you can debate how emotionally generous I've been with my friends, but you can't really, because I've been fucking great. But there's certainly no debate on how financially generous I've been with my friends over the years. I don't think not a single one of my friends would disagree with that statement. And, you know, I think in a lot of ways in this world, you create your own luck. And I think I created my financial luck. I've been lucky enough to have a lot of fucking angels who have sent me money during the pandemic since I couldn't work. And, you know, I'm sure some of that is in direct response to me talking about when I was suicidal, about how I gave all my money away. Everything I didn't spend, I gave away. But, like, you know, just tens and tens of thousands of dollars, maybe over $100,000. I blew over $200,000 in the last, like, 6 months of my life when I was headed towards suicide. and I never kept track of how much I gave, but I gave so much of it to different GoFundMe's. Tons of it to strangers. I would just see a GoFundMe on Twitter and be like, "This guy's getting $1,000." But yeah, that shit comes back to you. So did I fall and hit my head on that air conditioner and then slow my fall to the ground because God was looking out for me? I don't believe that. Is there some sort of divine intervention of some sort and karma, and that some people have better luck than others? Yeah, but I gotta chalk that up to karma, I think, for the most part. That's hard to figure out sometimes, man, because I don't know. I know a lot of good people, Why Bad Things Happen to Good People, very popular book, sold a lot of copies. And a lot of it doesn't make sense, so I don't know what the answer is, but I certainly believe that, like, you can't, like, look, not everybody who has bad things happen to them did bad things, right? If that was true, then there wouldn't be children's hospitals all over the place. But there's a direct correlation. I know a lot of bad people who have bad things happen to them. I know a lot of really good people who have good things happen to them. And I like to think I'm in that camp, even though I've done a lot of bad things. At least most of the bad things I've done, I've never really done with any sort of malicious intent to hurt somebody, except for a few fights where I really wanted to hurt somebody. But that was all so long ago. But yeah, I don't know. For the most part, I think I've created most of my luck. But yeah, I've certainly been blessed. What I was getting at with, like, people sending me donations and stuff. One came out the other day, a substantial amount of money from my boy Muscatel. I don't know if you want me to say your name out loud, so you know who you're talking about, my polar bear brother. Yeah, and I think I've been lucky to find, when I found that job down on the farm, and I've been lucky to find the job in Yellow Pine and find something that's, like, working for me, but at the same time, like Lorin told me the other day, actually, up at the Yellow Pine Tavern. In case you're not aware, I'll just tell you really quickly. There's a town called Yellow Pine. It's 2.5 hours away from where I live, just down a dirt road. There's no other ways to get there except dirt roads. It's an old mining town located deep in the heart of the Boise National Forest, and there's nothing else around it. My friends have asked, like, what do you ride past on these dirt roads? This one dirt road, really, Lick Creek Road, is the one I take. I go out behind the post office, make a right on Lick Creek Road. 6 miles later, it turns into dirt. 52 miles later, I'm in the town of Yellow Pine. And they've said, like, what do you pass? And I'm like, you literally don't pass anything, like nothing at all. You pass a couple of houses that are ranches that are grandfathered in from before the National Forest System was made, but you don't pass a streetlight, you don't pass a mailbox, you don't pass a fucking gas station, you don't pass anything. Just way in the middle of nowhere. But I went up there for a visit in June. The following weekend, I went back for 3 days to camp, met Lorin, the owner, chatted with her a bunch, said, do you need any help here? And she was like, you want to work here? Why? And I was like, I don't know, it seems fun. And I've been going back every weekend since. And she told me the other day, she literally just said, like, I don't think I'd still be open. If you hadn't shown up when you showed up, I really needed help. I've kind of had enough here, and I probably would have closed the place down or run screaming from it because it was just too much for me as one person. And so thank you for being here. But she told another woman, she told Big Creek Judy one day, like, where did this guy come from? And she said, he's just an angel that God sent to help me out when I needed it the most. And, I created my own luck by going up there. And that second time I went up there, I knew I was going looking for a job. I went up there, I told Greg and Shanti, I'm going to fucking get a job. I'm going to work at the Yellow Pine Tavern. And then I got there, and I was, like, nervous to ask her for the first couple of days, because I was like, she doesn't need my help. She's got it all under control. Even though she obviously didn't have it under control, she did. Like, she ran the place by herself. But on that third day, when I finally said to her, like, do you need help here? She was completely swamped and overwhelmed. Had, like, 6 tables going. She was cooking. She was waitressing. She was, bartending. She was fucking, taking the payment for all the orders, clearing the tables, bussing everything, like, all by herself. And I remember the second time I went up there, like the first day of the second trip, I got a little annoyed of why it was taking my food so long to get cooked. Now, I'll never get annoyed by that ever again. But yeah, she's like, I guess in that situation, I created my own luck by going up there and getting the job, and then I probably created even more good karma. I certainly created more good karma for the town. The people in the town are stoked to have me there. They tell me over and over. every weekend people are like, it's so wonderful that you came up here and that you've been such a big help to Loren. It's so wonderful that you're such a great bartender. We love having you here. It's so wonderful, just your energy. Like what that guy Willie told me a couple of weeks ago was like, you're just a special dude. Like, you just, nothing ruffles your feathers. People come in here, they try to bust your balls. You bust them right fucking back, but never in any sort of anger. And it's like, yeah, man, I'm a snarky, sarcastic fuck. And I love putting those talents to use. And I do it incredibly well. Old Tommy Lanham tried to get me this week. He tries to get me like every week. I think I might have mentioned on the podcast last week about him threatening to cut my hair. And I was like, you fucking try it, buddy. And then the other day, I should have been a little more forceful, but the other day I was asking him about hunting season and when it starts, and like, turns out hunting season starts up there on August 30th. That's when bow hunting season opens for elk. And I was like, oh, is it like the first Monday before Labor Day, or is it always August 30th? He's like, always August 30th. And I was like, oh, wow, neat. That's my birthday. Cool. Hunting season starts on my birthday. And he was like, oh, shit, that's your birthday. Yeah. He's like a real man's man, southern drawl kind of guy. Spent his whole life up there. He runs the hunting outfitter company. Outfitter is just a fancy term for a hunter tour guide, where I guess rich dudes go up there and they're like, I want to shoot a deer. And they're like, hey, come with us. We'll like track the deer. We'll figure it out. We'll tell you when to shut up, and then we'll hand you a rifle and you can shoot it. And like, seems like cheating to me. But yeah, we were talking about when hunting season ended, and he was like, yeah, what, you ain't never hunt? I was like, no, I never hunted. I was like, I used to have a jackalope hunting license that I bought in 1995 in Wall, South Dakota at Wall Drug. He's like, jackalope hunting license. Yeah, whatever. He's like, then he said, I got a faggot hunting license. I was like, Tom. And he's like, the sticker on the back of my truck says it. And I was like, oh, you're really good at hunting faggots, huh? And he was like, yep. And I was like, what do you must have a bunch of them like stuffed and mounted in your bedroom too, right? I'd like to get a look at what those say. And he just went wide-eyed, and his two little lackeys that he had with him went wide-eyed. I was like, man, I can only imagine what your bedroom looks like. Like, you probably have them all stuffed and mounted in all sorts of curious positions. It probably puts a real pep in your step every morning when you wake up and look at him. And I just started laughing at him. And then his friends started laughing at him. And all he can do when I kind of nail him like that is stick his hand out to shake my hand and be like, you're a damn good bartender, though. And that's what he said. He said to his boys, he might have long hair, but that's okay because he's a damn good bartender. And shook my hand. And I was like, I think I gave him enough shit without actually having to say, like, dude, you can't really use that word. Like I did a couple weeks ago with that guy with the N-word. But I was like, I think I told that last week. Anyway, if I didn't, I told the guy he wasn't allowed to say that in the bar and had to get the fuck out if he did it again. And he didn't last long. He left. But yeah, I just love putting my snarky, sarcastic bullshit to use. And like, this friend hit me the other day. It was like, they must really love a city slicker like you up there. And I'm like, I think they do, because I think they realize I'm not like up there just totally judging them. I'm just up there being me. They don't know anything about me. They don't know anything about my past. All they know is that I'm a cool dude. I get them their beer fast. I cook them really good fucking burgers. And I gotta say, I cook an amazing fucking burger. One of these days, one of you people who listen to my goddamn podcast is going to walk through the door of the Yellow Pine Tavern, and I'm going to be so excited to be able to serve you a goddamn cheeseburger. One of the best cheeseburgers you'll ever have in your life. And what I tell all the customers, best damn cheeseburger you'll find within 52 miles of this place. And I don't add the only cheeseburger you'll find within 52 miles of this place. You probably get one at Warm Lake Lodge. I'm sure it's not as good as ours. I'm fucking positive. But now that I'm saying that, before I keep running my mouth, Warm Lake Lodge is just like 35 miles from us, 40 miles from us. I'm going to have to go try the cheeseburger at Warm Lake Lodge. Maybe I'll even report back, let you know how it went. Oh, I talked about this last week. I said that I would say it on social media, but then I said I wouldn't, and I didn't, and I'm not going to. But I got my COVID test back after being inside for Harmonica Fest all weekend, and I tested negative. Like the kind of mental attitude I don't support, I don't want to hear on this podcast, and it's not the type of one I'm ever going to put out. Because I'm down with positive mental attitude, and I want you to be too. And I want you to think good thoughts, and I want you to create your own luck. And I want to thank you for listening to Tuesdays with Jakey. And I'd like to remind you that if you find anything I say on here valuable, if you find me pouring my emotional soul out, even if it's a low energy opening to the podcast like it was today, if you find any of this useful and helpful in your life, and you want to you want to let me know how useful you find it, you can let me know by sending me a text message, 917-443-7615. I have not been replying to a lot of text messages since July 3rd, when I started going up to Yellow Pine, or even before that, really, when I went up for those 3 days and left my phone behind. I have found that most text messaging conversations do not give me the joy that I used to hope to find in them. So I don't reply to a lot of messages, but if you send me a message about the podcast, I'll reply. Maybe we even get on the phone sometime if I know you in person or in real life. You want to send me a postcard, do it at P.O. Box 4116, McCall, Idaho 83638. If you want to just send some money my way, I will use it to do awesome shit. I promise you. I'm sure I'm going to do some awesome shit this winter, even if I'm living in Yellow Pine all winter, which I'm hoping is going to be the case. But if you want to make a donation to this podcast and to my fun so-called life, you can do that. PayPal, jake@rocksoft.com, Venmo @jake-sufnerowski, or, mail a check to P.O. Box 4116, McCall, Idaho. Venmo's also hooked up to my phone number, which I'll say one more time. That is 917-443-7615. I'm getting new tires on my motorcycle. I got new tires for my feet the other day. I got these badass trail shoes. I'm going to show them to the screen right now in case you watch this podcast on YouTube, where it's available on video, which I do every week without fail since I started the video. And I should also say, I think we're like deep 30 episodes in or something. I started this podcast December 22nd. All right, so there was 2 in December, 22nd, 29th. What are we, third week in August? So the first 7, 4, 28. Yeah, we're well over 30 episodes now of this podcast, which is wild. I don't keep count because I don't list these as episode 1, 2, 3, 4. I just list them as the date. On YouTube, Instagram, Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen to podcasts, find them there. One last thing I'd like to ask you to do, if you could, if you're the type of person who writes reviews on Yelp and or TripAdvisor, if you could write a nice review for the Yellow Pine Tavern, keep it somewhat serious so it doesn't seem like I asked you to do it, but of course if you want to mention the awesome music that's playing inside, the great fucking cheeseburgers, and the coolest fuck bartender with the long hair, you can feel free to do that, because I'm going to be working there for quite some time, I have a feeling, if Lorin doesn't in fact just make me own it, which, crazier things have happened, crazier things will happen, and I don't even know if I want that to happen, so I probably shouldn't put it out there. But I do plan on working there for a while because it's a cool gig. It's cool people. Kind of like my friend Orwe sent me a postcard last week, and it said, she said, I hope I can find my yellow pine. Something along those lines. And, yeah, I found my yellow pine. I thought I had found McCall, and I actually took the McCall shirt. I've nicknamed the town I live in. I guess that I live in. I live here 3 days a week and live in Yellow Pine 4 days a week right now. But I lived here since last September. I lived in this town called McCall, Idaho, which is also very far away from nowhere. It's 106 miles north of Boise. You get 2 traffic lights on the way out of Boise when you hit the edge of town, and then you literally don't hit another traffic light other than a flashing yellow light in Horseshoe Bend. Not even a fucking stop sign all the way to my house 106 miles away. Yeah, I brought my McCall shirt. I nicknamed this town McCall, and I brought my shirt up. I had a bunch of extras that I haven't sold, which, I might as well say now. If you go to rocksoff.bigcartel.com, you want to buy one of my McCall t-shirts, you can do that. You can also buy a Suck and Blow shirt, which I just had reprinted, or a World Famous Yellow Pine Tavern shirt, or World Famous Yellow Pine sticker. You can buy some of my paintings, whatever you want, or just send me money. But it feels good when people just send me money, but it feels good when people buy things too. But when you buy things, then I have to give you something for your money, which is that's not the best. Under capitalism, the goal of capitalism is just to take people's money and not give them anything back for it, right? That's what it feels like, because people just take more and more money for giving you less and less service. So in the goal of being exceptionally capitalistic, just send me money. But no, if you want to buy something. Anyway, I brought my McCall shirts up there, and I was like, we had a lot of people visiting from McCall, and I hung one up to try to sell what I had left in the tavern, which is more than I wish I had left. And a few people commented on it and snickered like McCall, because everyone up in Idaho, nobody thinks of this place as McCall. And anyone from this section of Idaho, if you're from Boise, you might, the idea of McCall makes sense. But this place is so overrun with tourists, especially in the summer. People are just flocking to this town because it's kind of cool and by a lake. And people who've been here for a while and remember what McCall used to be like are like, that place is anything but McCall. Where we live up here at the McCall Pound, it is super calm because we live 10 miles outside of town up on the side of a mountain. But, yeah, I thought I had found my spot in McCall. I was like, yeah, I kind of like it. But now that I'm up in Yellow pine, I really have. I found my bliss. I found my yellow pine. So I hope you can find your yellow pine. I hope Arwie has already found hers. And I just want to remind you, people, create your own luck. Keep your feet on the ground. Keep reaching for the stars. And if God wills it, it's gonna be. Peace. God bless, and inshallah.